Hi, this is my directed reading thinking activity, and the book that I chose is called The Frog Scientist. And this one is probably a little longer than I would use for a single day activity, but I was reading it and I absolutely love this book, and if I really want to use this in the classroom, but I would use it over multiple days. And since I'm going to do it over, I would do it over multiple days, I'm going to kind of brush over all of the sections pretty quickly. I'm not going to read from all of the sections just because it would take a long time. But yeah, here it goes. So, this is called The Frog Scientist. And on the cover, you can see a guy, the scientist, and up here, and then there's a frog. So, I want you to make a prediction of what you think this book is about. Okay? Alright. So, now we're going to look at the table of contents, at some of the themes that we'll be reading about. Okay. So, the table of contents. First section is called The Frog Squad. The next, The Frog Kid. The Amphibian Ark. Follow the Water. Tyrone's Question. Nature's Answer. Independence, Persistence, Purduance, and Balance. Okay, and as you can see on the inside, on the table of contents, is a list of a bunch of different frogs. So, now I'm going to give you some time to think about what you think, again, what you think this book is going to be about, and I'll give you a second to write it out, and we're going to get started. We're starting with The Frog Squad, and I'm going to bounce around a little bit, just so you know. I wouldn't do this in the classroom, but just for time's sake, I'm jumping around. Alright. The sun is just peeking over the golden Wyoming hills as Dr. Tyrone wakes his team. Jasmine Reyes sleeps wrapped in green mosquito netting. "Jasmine, the giant pickle," he teases. "Get up." Two more rumpled heads pop out of the grass. Tyrone's son, Tyler, and young Kim Parker. Field biology is not for those who like to sleep in. No one stops for breakfast either. Daybreak is prime frog catching time. Young walks over to the Dugway Pond, just a few feet from the campsite. She wades out and sinks a sample bottle into the cool water. Tyrone, Jasmine, and Tyler stock the edges of the pond with nets. Though they try to be sneaky with each step, juvenile leopard frogs scatter in all directions. The hopping frogs look like little green kernels popping corn. So when it says little green kernels popping like popping corn, what does that make you think of? Have you ever walked along the side of a pond or a river or something and seen frogs hopping into the water? Jasmine's net steps down into the brown muck at the pond's edge. It comes up empty. "Get under them," advises Tyrone, pulling a captured frog out of his net. Young grabs a net and joins Tyrone, Jasmine, and Tyler on the frog hunt. Everyone counts out loud as they add frogs to the collection bag. 15, 16, 17. Their goal: 50 juvenile frogs. Clouds of tiny mayflies rise over the pond. The scientific name for this kind of insect is Ephemeritera, meaning lasting but a day. That's about all the time an adult mayfly gets. When mayflies reach adulthood, they mate and then die within hours, raining from the sky and becoming frog food. Many of the mayfly fattened frogs around this pond will in turn become food for the two blue herons winging overhead. This corner of Wyoming seems to be untouched by humans. The water, air, and sweet-smelling grass are all abuzz with life. You wouldn't know it, but even in a place like this, there can be pesticides that can harm wildlife. What do you think pesticides are? Do you know what pesticides are? How do you think pesticides will affect the environment? A pesticide is a chemical designed to kill a pest, either a weed or an insect. Every year, farmers spray millions of pounds of pesticides on their crops. As rainwater drains off of fields, it carries pesticides with it. The pesticides end up in ponds, streams, and rivers. Pesticides can also stick to tiny bits of dirt. When the wind blows, pesticide-laced dust is swept into the air. The pesticide may end up hundreds of miles from a farmer's field. Pesticides are not meant to harm frogs. However, when people put pesticides into the environment, the effects can be very hard to control. Tyrone wants to know how pesticides in the environment affect growing frogs. How do you think that pesticides will affect growing frogs? Do you think it'll make a difference? Why or why not? Okay. And I would continue reading this section, and after this section I would probably stop for today and have them maybe change their predictions or add some feedback or that sort of thing. Okay. I'm just going to keep going. The Frog Kid. Tyrone didn't worry about chemicals in the water when he was younger. He just liked to wade in it. My neighbor was near a swamp full of frogs, snapping turtles, and snakes, he recalls. My interest in them started when I was about 4 or 5. I tell kids, if there's something that you like doing, stick with it. So this is a picture of Tyrone reading a book, What is a Frog? And then over here is a picture of Tyrone when he was little. And instead of reading this section, let's just look through the pictures. It's filled with all these pictures of Tyrone the frog scientist. Okay, next section. Fragile frogs. Take a look at this picture. How many different types of frogs do you think there are? Are they big frogs? Small frogs? Are they fast? Slow? What kind of food do you think they eat? Pick one of these frogs that's your favorite and write a couple predictions. What you think they eat, if they're poisonous, if they're not, where you think they live. Amphibian scientists are like everybody else. They like to talk about what they do. At an international conference in 1989, nearly everyone was telling the same story. There seemed to be fewer amphibians. Frogs, toads, salamanders, salients. Each scientist thought it was happening just to the animals he or she studied. But when the scientists talked to one another, they realized what was happening, that it was happening everywhere. Concerned scientists surveyed amphibian populations all over the world. They discovered that about a third of the amphibian species are threatened with extinction. Since 1980, at least 122 species have probably become extinct. Why do you think they're coming extinct? Okay. I'm going to skip to the next section. The amphibian ark. In June 2005, Ron Gagliardo and Joe Mendelson arrived in Atlanta, Georgia, with specifically modified carry-on suitcases full of frogs. What else can you do with a whole community that's going to be wiped out? Asks Ron, the amphibian conservation coordinator at the Atlanta Botanical Garden. So these guys are preservation experts. So they're collecting all of these frogs and keeping them safe. I want you to take a look at all these different types of frogs and see if you can decide or figure out or make a prediction about why you think they all look so different. They're all frogs, right? Shouldn't all frogs look the same? But this one The casque-headed tree frog looks an awful lot like a leaf. And the mushroom-tongued salamander looks like a weird salamander frog thing. And then the Bob's robber frog looks like a dried up leaf. I wonder why they look this way. Okay, as we continue, we're into the follow the water section. And this is where it talks about the life cycle of a frog. What they eat, how long it takes for them to develop. Okay, Tyrone's question. Okay, we're going to keep going till we find exactly where Tyrone's question is. Tyrone's hypothesis is that if frogs are raised in water contaminated by atrazine, a type of pesticide, then many of the males will be feminized. They'll grow eggs and they'll be a female instead of a male. To test this hypothesis, Tyrone uses a manipulated variable, something that is deliberately changed or manipulated, and a responding variable, something measurable that responds to change. The best way of remembering which is to think of an if and then statement. Tyrone's hypothesis says, if he raises frogs in water contaminated by atrazine, the water is the manipulated variable, then many males will become females. The male frogs are responding to the variable. I want you guys to write your predictions as to whether or not you think his hypothesis will be correct. And this is going on to show his process, testing his hypothesis, what he's doing, what he's seeing. Okay, some more pictures. This is the picture of his research group. Nature's answer. So this is where he's going to go to nature to see what the results are. Pictures together. So here, they're looking at the difference, analyzing the difference. And here's where they determined that there is a difference. That there is a difference. So, obviously, there's more to this book. I'm breezing over a lot of the sections. Here's the picture I was looking for, I couldn't find. Here's where they talk about the tadpoles of bullfrogs with the pesticide introduced and the tadpoles without the pesticide being introduced. There's a clear difference in the size of the bullfrog tadpoles. Yeah. And then here's the glossary and a picture of all of the frogs that were talked about. And it talks about what their name is, what their Latin name is, and where they're from. So, obviously this is a big book, and this is more of a like 5th, 6th, maybe 7th grade reading level. But I would do this as a read aloud, and I would do this over the span of a couple days, maybe even a week, talking about hypothesis and predictions and testing that hypothesis and that sort of thing. You could also use it when you're talking about life cycles and that sort of thing. Yes. And then at the end of each section, what I would do is I would ask them to look at their predictions and to see if maybe they can answer those predictions based on what they heard and what they saw in the pictures, and then make predictions of what's going to happen in the next section. So I would read the section, have them analyze it, and then I would have them make predictions on the next section. So I would read it to them. So, for example, when I read a big chunk out of the Frog Squad, when I got to the next section, which is the Frog Kid, I would have them make predictions as to what they think the Frog Kid means and who they think the Frog Kid is, and that sort of thing. So I know this isn't exactly a single day activity, but I think it would be really interesting to you.